Welcome back. Indy NXT Debrief as Indy NXT hit the streets of Detroit for our most chaotic Indy NXT race of the season. We have plenty to discuss. We've got two awesome drivers coming on this week. It's going to be a very, very packed episode with a lot to debrief from the streets of Detroit.
Yes, you mentioned it, Dan. We have Enzo Fittipaldi, the race winner, returning for the second time in as many episodes. And we also have a first-timer, Myles Rowe. So the top two are both on the show this week.
Unfortunately, we're back virtually after hosting two in-person interviews at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway with good friends of the show, Tim Archie and Alessandro Dettido. So check that episode out if you haven't already. But let's speak to another HMD Motorsports driver in Enzo Fittipaldi. So here's Enzo reflecting on his victory at Detroit. So we're joined by Enzo Fittipaldi after winning the Indy NXT race in Detroit. Enzo, congratulations, your second victory in 2 weekends. This one very different to your win in Indianapolis. Just how did it feel to win out in Detroit this weekend?
Yeah, so super happy to be here on the podcast again and talk about the race weekend and racing in general. And it was a pretty hectic race. Detroit was a street course that's very bumpy, easy to make mistakes. And yeah, we had starting off the weekend, we had a decent free practice. When to FP2 we ended up fourth. I felt good with the car and everything. Went to qualifying and our group was very tight. I finished fourth in my group in the qualifying, but I was less than a tenth off the pole. So it was extremely tight qualifying. So that meant that we lined up seventh for the main race, or for the race on Sunday. And I knew I had the speed and pace to move forward. So the goal was, have a good start and just make passes and try and get to the as front as I can, as much forward as I can, basically. And yeah, I think it was a crazy race. The start was very tense. I remember I didn't have the best start, and then I was able to put it around the outside. I outbraked already one or two cars, and then I looked to my left, and there's this car just going straight, and I said, "Oh, this guy's gonna hit someone, or he's gonna go straight into the wall." And he ended up hitting the two leaders, and I was on the outside, and I said, "Oh, I'm gonna, that's race over for me. I'm gonna get stuck here." So I kind of checked up because the guy in front of me checked up, and when I checked up, the guy behind me, De Alba, hit me because he had a broken front wing already. And when he hit me, I hit Taylor, but when he hit me, it also rotated my car out, just a bit to the left, and I was able to drive out. And I said, "But we're probably gonna have to box because I just smashed into Taylor. I have." For sure, rear diffuser damage and front wing damage. And luckily, my front wing was still on the car, but pretty much very damaged. The front nose had a big hole on it, and the left side was just dangling off. So, yeah, it was tricky. But after all that chaos, we were able to come out in the top three. And then the race was difficult initially. We lost quite a lot of balance because of the front wing. So I was struggling with quite a lot of understeer. But still, able to keep up with the leaders, this and that. And then from middle to the race onwards, I started finding a lot of speed and pace, setting the fastest laps of the race. And then I said, man, I was in third, and I said, if I have an opportunity to make a move or try and get up front, I know I can stay there and hopefully win the race. And that's exactly what happened. Rowe went for a lunge on Timic, a pretty late lunge, and they went a little bit wide out of turn 3, and that was the perfect opportunity for me to do the crossover, and I overtook both of them, took the lead, and got the win with the fastest laps. So it was pretty crazy race, hectic, and I think we did a great job. The team did a great job, so just super happy with the result.
Let's go back to that race start, because that's where it all kicked off. As we saw, we've seen some few chaotic starts this season, but Detroit is always one where there's going to be a bit of carnage. So do you kind of try and play it a little bit safe in Detroit, or is it one of those cases where the carnage is going to happen whatever, you just have to hope you're lucky and in the right place in the right time?
Yeah, I feel honestly, every race start I do, I try and do the best start possible. I never go conservative. For me, anytime I've ever gone conservative, I always end up not in a good position. So like they say, the best way to defend is to attack. So my style of racing is always move forward, always attack, have good starts, and do your best everywhere. Don't try and be conservative. And yeah, luckily I actually didn't have a great start, and we went whatever, and it was just like a hectic start, right? Because I think Correa like moved down and it actually hit De Alba's front wing, and broke his front wing before we even got to turn 3, and Hughes had to kind of check up a bit. I was on the outside, and then he just, I think, I don't know if he was just on the dirty part of the track or he missed the break point or misjudged it, and took, yeah, it was like a bowling ball into the whole field. Yeah, that's the start at Detroit. It's crazy, right? Because you have like this hairpin there, which is like super wide, and you're all arriving, and it's just like everyone wants to get to the front, and there's always something going on. So it is a very crazy race. Very enjoyable if you come out on the good side of things, right? Yeah.
I'm interested in kind of your impressions of the track as well, because as you say, it's kind of wide in points, then it gets really narrow. It's very bumpy. There's kind of 90-degree corners, a really long straight. So I guess compared to what you've maybe been used to in your career, what are your impressions of, I guess, Detroit specifically, but also just IndyCar's street races in general as well, being quite different?
For me, it's the best there is for any race car driver. Like, by far better than any European street courses. Bear in mind, I love Europe. I love the tracks like the F1 Formula 2 do. Like, the street courses are amazing, but they're always like so perfect, right? Like so smooth. They repave the track. There's not one bump. So it is a street course, right? Because you have the walls there and stuff, but the only like track that's like a little bit bumpy, like similar to the US, is Monaco. When you come out of the tunnel and then you brake into that big braking zone out of the tunnel, it's quite bumpy. But that's really about it. Like, all the tracks in Europe and all the street courses I've done outside of the US are very smooth, and I think it's easier to get to the limit when you come to the US as a racing driver. Like, these tracks, they don't repave it. They just put the cars on there and they say drive. There's potholes, there's bumps. Like, you have to like see where the potholes are on the track and like drive around them. So like at Detroit, we have to do like a line on the back straight, like totally to the left, where the ideal line would just be like straight through the middle of the road, right? But we have to stay like really close to the left because that's the smoothest part of the track. If you go in the middle, which I did in FP, I got this massive pothole and my car just like took off, and I said, all right, no, you really have to stay to the left. And then you open it up under braking. So yeah, the tracks in the US, the street courses are very rough, very raw, and the way you drive it and get to the limit, it's a very unique driving style. Because you're arriving to the brake zones at like 200 miles an hour, and it's just super bumpy. So you can't always maximize your initial hit on the brakes. So it's very different, and as a driver, it's very enjoyable because easier for the drivers to make mistakes. So the races are more chaotic, and it's more fun, in my opinion.
And I'm kind of interested going back to qualifying. I know kind of the last few weekends, you haven't necessarily qualified first couple of rows right up at the front. So is there any kind of reason behind that beyond it just being obviously very tight in terms of times? And actually then like kind of following up to that, like, does it actually matter that much where you qualify? Like, are you in Indy NXT, is it more possible to kind of race your way forward if you don't qualify as well? Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the qualifying for us, like, we had a good quali at Arlington where we were just, I think, P1 in our group and just a bit off of the pole, like I think less than half a tenth. And then, yeah, after that, I mean, I don't know, we've just been struggling to have everything together in qualifying, like balance, my driving a bit, and just, putting everything together because we have the speed, like we have the raw pace to be winning races and fighting at the front. So yeah, like, honestly, for me, like 10th, 7th, start 5th, I always move forward. So I know I'm going to be going forward. So I never get too worried after qualifying. I just, I'm just like, man, I'm just making my life more difficult. But yeah, I know I have the raw speed to be winning races. It's just a matter of putting everything together in qualifying, which I'm sure we will this year in the future rounds. And yeah, in Indy NXT, I think qualifying is for sure very important, but The races have been so chaotic this year that I think I mean, if you have the speed in the race, you can actually really move forward. So yeah, we've been really strong on race pace. Like even with the damage in the front nose and stuff, I did the fastest lap time in the race at Detroit by a 10th with the damaged car. So yeah, I know I have the speed. It's just putting it together and qualifying.
And let's speak about that damage you had at the start. Kind of what was the difference that it made to the car? Did you feel a significant balance or performance shift when that happened? And as a driver, like, do you kind of get mentally distracted by that? Do you thinking of what the outcomes could be when you have a situation like that unfolding?
Yeah, I definitely knew there was damage. I mean, when I hit the car in front, I could see pieces from the front of my car flying off. So I knew there was damage. I didn't know how bad the damage was. So after I had gone to the front straight where the team was, I asked on the radio, I said, guys, how bad is the damage on the front nose? Because I hit the car in front of me. Because I had got pushed from behind. And the team were like, no, you're good. You're good. You have no damage. And I said, all right. Are you guys sure? And I'm like, and they're like, yeah, you're good. Don't worry. Just keep pushing. Focus. And I'm like, all right, whatever. Safety car's in. I'm going to start the first push lap of the restart. And I could just feel this massive amount of air coming through the cockpit. And I said, oh, this is not normal. Because I had like a mat, like the whole front nose was completely open. So all the air was just flowing through the cockpit and into my helmet. And I said, yeah, there's definitely a lot of damage. But the team obviously was just saying to me, like, they don't want to make it. They want me to just relax and obviously just do the best with what the situation was. And obviously the team said there wasn't a lot of damage, but I knew after the first safety car restart, like I had heavy damage. For sure, it didn't help us, especially like down the straights. It was dragging quite a lot. But yeah, as a driver, it's easy to get distracted in those moments and be like, oh, I won't be able to fight. I'm not, my car's damaged. And no, for me, I just, man, this is what I have. I'm going to do the best I can with this. And that's what we did.
And obviously you were second for a bit under quite a bit of pressure from Myles, fell down to third. So just talk a bit about kind of just in that situation where you kind of do feel maybe a bit on the back foot, a bit under pressure, you lose that position, obviously drop down to third. Like, what's that mindset in terms of kind of gathering yourself back up, making sure that, because obviously then Max Garcia was quite close behind you. Like, what's the mindset in terms of not panicking as you lose those positions and just kind of staying patient, I guess, just a bit about that.
Yeah, it's kind of just like reading the picture from the outside, right? Like, it's easy when you're there as a driver, you don't want to like give up your second position. But like when you're there as a, in the car, and I felt like I could just read the whole situation pretty well because I saw Timic started struggling. Like, he had really good pace initially. And then middle, like before when I was in second and Myles was behind me, I knew Myles was quicker at that moment, but I was also quicker than Timic. So we were both catching him. And when he went for the move, I didn't really see the point of like fighting because I knew he was quicker. Like, you could just tell, like, I'm going to lose more time defending and fighting with him if the goal is to try and get to Timic. So basically, I knew Myles was being aggressive at that moment. So he went for the lunge, and I said, all right, he's going to do the same with Timic when he gets there. So when he does that to Timic, I got to make sure I'm close enough to at least try something. So that was kind of like the way I saw it. And it worked out. Like, it worked out perfectly. And that's exactly what happened. The safety car restart, Myles was close enough. I said, he's for sure going to go for a lunge. He did. I made sure I braked really well into turn 3, prepared my exit, and I did. And I was able to overtake both of them. And yeah, it's easy at those moments to like panic, but at the same time, I knew my pace was getting better and better. So yeah, as soon as I got on the lead, I said, man, now I know I can stay here. Cause I was doing like fastest lap just before that. So yeah, that's basically what happened. And, yeah, it was really nice.
And I guess a product of that chaos is you get a lot of restarts. So especially those last couple where you are leading the field, what was your kind of approach on those restarts?
Approach was just to, make sure I get the best exit out of 2, because 2 was I know that if I made a mistake out of 2, and then he would have a chance to do a lunge that he's been doing the whole race into 3. So I really made sure I was doing turn 2 as good as I possibly could, and that, was what helped me to defend my lead. And I was actually pulling away from him at every restart. I would, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10s until the last safety car. I had pulled like a gap of 1 second. So even without the safety car, I think we would have won the race by 2 or 3 seconds. We had a really good pace there at the end. But yeah, the safety car restarts, just making sure you don't make a silly mistake with the tires have cooling down quite a bit and you have less grip. Just making sure you're tidy through the corners you need to be, getting good exits so you minimize the attack of the competitor that's behind. And that's basically what I was doing.
Coming over to America, there's naturally going to be a lot of differences that you have to experience coming over from Europe, whether that's tyres, the tracks, rolling starts, whatever it is. There's a lot to learn. But what maybe has surprised you the most since you've come over to America? Maybe what's been the biggest adaptation curve since you come over?
I think the racing itself is more tense. Like when I feel like the drivers in general here in the US are a bit more aggressive in terms of overtaking, defending, everything's slightly more exaggerated. And I think that's also has to do a bit with the rules, right? Like in IndyCar, if you go for an overtake, and that's your line, right? So basically when you go for a move, the guy that's on the outside, it's not his line anymore. So basically the guy that's on the inside can basically put the other guy in the wall if he wants to, right? So that's something that changes a lot, the racing in the US compared to Europe. I just feel like it's a lot more rough, a lot more like almost feels like a battlefield when you're out there. And yeah, it's fun. It's very fun. It's I feel like you're a lot more open to, people that have good racecraft can show a lot their abilities here in the US compared to Europe. I feel like you're very restricted with the rules. So yeah, that's I think the biggest thing to adapt to in the US.
And you said after the weekend, obviously you now lead the championship, but you said that your approach doesn't really change whether you're leading the championship or not. So I'm kind of just interested, why does your approach not change regardless of kind of where you are in the standings?
I don't think like people say, oh, now you're leading the championship, now you need to be more conservative and be careful. I think that's where, things start getting tricky, is like if you start changing the way you approach a race and it's been working up until now, and then now you're just going to change the way you do things because you're leading the championship, the chances of it not working out are quite high. I know the way I race, I'm very aggressive, but I'm smart at the same time. I think about things before I do them most of the time. But yeah, I think it's just, I think obviously what maybe changes a bit now is like, let's say I'm in 7th or 8th in the race, and it's last lap, and then there's a guy in 6th, and there's a opportunity to do a lunge from a big distance away. I think maybe you're not going to want to take that unnecessary risk, because like with the way the point systems work, it's like 1 points difference from 7th to 6th, where if you get a DNF, you lose a lot in Indy NXT. So I think it's just reading the situation, reading the position you're in, worth fighting for. Like for me, if it's for the win, podium, whatever, I'm going for it. I'm all in. That's the way I race. But yeah, I think it's just being aggressive but being smart at the same time.
So obviously going to Worldwide Technology Raceway this weekend, or Gateway as people like to know it, first oval race in Indy NXT. So I guess just what's your outlook for that? Like, how much are you looking forward to it? How comfortable do you kind of feel about the idea of the first oval weekend? Just, yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm super excited. It's going to be the first oval race for us this year. And, we had a solid test there a month ago. So yeah, I'm very excited. I can't wait to have that first taste of oval racing with open wheel cars. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to having fun and you know enjoying the racing as much as possible this weekend.
When you go onto an oval for the first time, what would you say kind of the biggest learning curve is? Is it dealing with traffic, tyre management, when and when not to use the high line? Like, what do you think going into this weekend do you feel like you need to kind of learn the most?
I think it's definitely the racing itself, like running in traffic, timing your passes. That's something that I feel like with more experience, you get better at ovals. So I've been doing a lot of studying and prep for this weekend. So that's something that, I've been working on the tests, like, the race traffic running and everything. It's a lot playing like a chess game, you know what I mean? So you have to be very strategic with your moves, or when you're going to overtake someone and how you're going to do it. It's like you really have to prepare your passes on an oval and prepare them well and really read the situation. So it's a lot about, using your head and being brave at the same time, right?
Congratulations once again, Enzo. 2 victories in 2 weekends, as we said. Obviously a bit of a challenge this weekend, but we wish you the very best of luck, and hopefully we'll catch you back on the show sometime soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, man. And hopefully you won't be with that Vodafone anymore.
So that was Enzo. You may or may not have figured, depending on how Dan edits this, he was battling some quite hilarious tech issues, which led to Enzo making a comment about Dan's provider, who Dan has a pretty big relationship with, so that was pretty funny. But anyway, here is Myles Rowe in our second interview of this episode.
So we're now joined by Myles Rowe, who finished second on the streets of Detroit. It's your first podium of the season, Myles, so congratulations. Just kind of in the context of your season, how much was this result needed for you?
Yeah, for sure. It's huge. Clearly, our program's been having a little bit of struggles on the road and street course. So being able to come back, from P11, we weren't having such a hot weekend from pre-practice 1 all the way to qualifying, even to come back from P11 and go up into the podium position, which was our goal. That was very huge for us, no doubt. So it's good to have that momentum going into the ovals, which we know is something I think all of us at Able and the system is kind of looking forward to.
And I guess a big part of your race was obviously the start, which was pretty chaotic, but just kind of taking it back before the start of the race, knowing that you were kind of starting mid-pack where things can get a bit chaotic. What was your approach on a first racing corner that can be as chaotic as that?
Yeah, I was not too shocked to see, the chaos happen the way it did. Obviously the jump in position that I did, just going around turn 3 at that time was a little bit of a shock. Just being able to, slide through all the cars that easily. That is kind of what that corner breeds. So luckily I was on the inside there, because you can look towards the same situation just on the opposite side. Josh Pearson on my row 6, who just was on the outside, and everything went completely different his way, so to speak. So definitely that was a luck of the draw. We know how racing goes, but definitely predicted that well. I was able to get on the inside of Nannini pretty early on, which kind of made that a lot easier for me. I think if I wasn't on the inside of Nannini, probably would have been a little bit more difficult to make up all those positions, but being there and just having that free space was just allowed me to just be able to, run my line on the inside and avoid all that chaos, which worked out really well for us.
Detroit is a pretty unique track on the schedule. It's not like many other places. It's known for a chaos and its carnage. So kind of, do you like the challenge where you can have slightly chaotic races and it's about precision and trying to avoid the carnage, or are you kind of like the more traditional, let's say, calmer tracks you get across the rest of the season?
That's not really too much, you take what you get. I think obviously with our program having difficulties like it does and qualifying being an issue, no doubt, appreciate kind of the breaks you get from such races like that, like we did in that race. But just kind of where my head is always at, always thinking about being in the front. That's something that you typically don't want to see. First of all, for safety, number 1, regardless. And then just 2, thinking of being always, in the front and being the leader, you want a more controlled race where you can keep your rhythm and keep your cadence and be able to be a little bit more in control rather than having these other factors determining the cadence of the race.
And you kind of speak about that rhythm and that cadence of the race. We saw you kind of really kind of break into that rhythm kind of midway through the race where you're pursuing Enzo. You eventually got second and you were gaining quite a lot of time with Timek at that point as well. So how comfortable were you feeling in the car at that point? How confident did you feel that you could potentially get the lead in those kind of moments there?
Yeah, that was a good point in the race. I think just in terms of the car balance, like for the program as well, because I think we've struggled a little bit with how, especially in Detroit, I think that was one thing that happened in qualifying. The tires coming in has not been something that we've been good at this year. And I think in that race, that was the first time this year where they actually came in at a good time for us to really attack at the appropriate time. So that's where you saw that time game on Timek and me being able to pass Enzo and, you know, be able to have that forward momentum. I think we struggled at making the tires come in properly at those right times to actually be on the attack. But since we had that, it made things a lot easier for me to just kind of keep my head down and just knock down the laps and knock down the time essentially. And yeah, I think we really succeeded well in doing that.
And then obviously there came the point where on that restart you decided to make the move on Timek. So I guess why was that the opportunity you decided to kind of make the move down the inside? I know he kind of described it afterwards as audacious, but can you just talk a bit about the thought process of when you went for that lunge?
In my perspective, I'm on board, I'm fully in control. To take time to answer that, in his perspective, I can understand it. In a sense, but if someone moves, you can't quite see in the broadcast if someone's actually reacted or not. You know, it might be a little, you know, hard to tell from the broadcast footage. But luckily, on the broadcast, you can clearly see the dotted lines and clearly see the position of the cars. And I get his perspective, considering that the officials, for some reason, decided that there was no penalty needed for him there. But the rules clearly state if you move in reaction to your pursuing competitor, it is a block. And you look at the 71 car and you look at me move to the side, and then you look at the 71 car move to the 99 car in reaction. You see him cross over the lanes, and that's when everything became audacious, I guess, in his worldview. I guess he sees it as audacious because they didn't call the penalty, so he probably doesn't believe he blocked or moved in reaction. I think it's pretty clear that he moved in reaction. And so for me, I had to release the brake in order to make sure I got my nose underneath him in time so that we didn't collide. I'm lucky, and we're both are lucky that in his reactionary move, my right front did not clip his left rear, and I go flipping or something very dangerous happen. And in order to kind of do that, I had to release the brake to make him accept that I was there at that point, because his reactionary move showed that he was not willing to accept that I already had that position, already had that move on him. I know without a reactionary move, I would have kept my foot on the brake, kept the PSI up, and never would have ended up that wide in the corner, and also never would have been so far on the inside where all the marbles were simultaneously. Since he moved in reaction, I'm more on the inside of the marbles, and I'm releasing the brake now to make sure that he knows I'm there. So simultaneously, we went very wide, and Enzo was luckily close enough to capitalize on both. That's how I see it. And it's unfortunate that something so blatant was just left, uncalled. I think obviously if there was something, where it ended both of our races or we both ended up with damage, I think the officials would have looked at that a lot differently.
So that's an interesting point, actually, because obviously the IndyCar race, we saw kind of quite a lot of wheel banging and drivers kind of almost using other drivers up, driving them wide and what have you. So where do you kind of feel like that line is in terms of kind of where things should start being penalized? I know this was obviously on this occasion kind of a blocking issue, but is there kind of a point where you feel like the racing standards become almost too kind of aggressive, too raw, which I know people like to say is a great thing about IndyCar and Indy NXT, but what's your view on kind of where that balance lies?
I think they do a good job at letting us race, right? And I think in terms of Apex out, things are very similar in Europe as they are here, where the car on the inside, if they're on the racing line, they have all authority to their racing line, right? And I fully agree with that. I've been pushed wide many times. I don't really complain about it too much, because we almost, at least I expect that, and that's what we see in the IndyCar paddock. That's what we see in the Formula One paddock. No one really leaves too much room on the outside unless you are, four wheels together. But if you're lacking and falling back on the outside, typically we see people getting pushed off the road. And that is, the car ahead pursuing their racing line. And I fully agree with that. I think the problems are more towards entry, braking towards the apex, and how attentive we are to what we are actually going to call blocking or not, because there's a lot of safety issues there that need to be addressed. And a lot of times they are. And a lot of times, especially in Indy NXT, they've been very good at that, which is why I was very surprised with just our incident in turn 3, because it became a situation where it seems like I purposely ran him off the road, but it wasn't something that was decided apex out. That was something that was a reaction or a consequence that happened from braking to apex.
And I guess after a race like that, where you come home second, it's your best result of the year, but you feel like you maybe still had an opportunity to win. How do you kind of balance that happiness of a good result, but also that disappointment where maybe you could have had a victory? Like, how do you generally feel at the result post weekend?
Yeah, I don't think maybe with not a yellow flag or starting or a green flag before the race ended, maybe a win would be possible. But I think everything that happened still would have happened. I think second place was going to be what it was. I think the difference is my teammate would have been in P3, and the 71 would have. I think it was something that wasn't affecting my position, is something that was affecting someone else's race behind me. I'm very satisfied and content with my position. It's just about, what we expect, what we expect from other drivers and how they're going to drive. I understand, my overtakes are they can come from very far back and come very surprising. But they are, in a sense, very clean until someone, reacts and tries to block me. And then that's when things get very dangerous, because they are very aggressive moves. And that's why those rules are in place, to not, put us in these positions. And I think this has nothing to do with my second place. This really has to do with the person who finished in fourth place, who really should be in third place. Because it's, yeah, like I said, I'm content with my position, and I think this affects, the order behind me, not in front of me.
And I guess coming into the season, you were carrying quite a lot of momentum from the end of 2025. You'd obviously had your best season to date in Indy NXT, but maybe kind of the first 6 rounds or so more difficult than you hoped. So did you kind of have any reason those first 6 rounds why it was a bit more difficult, and been able to pinpoint maybe what that was, which changed coming into Detroit?
Yeah, I think the big thing was just, there's been a lot. We've been struggling with the tires, right? And that's been something very difficult for us in the past. And like I said, we even didn't get it in qualifying. But we really did find something with that in the race here in Detroit. And I know we're going to try to figure out something like that as we go, obviously, into Road America Mid-Ohio. On top of that, there's been a lot of braking issues that we've been struggling with through the season. Things with like the bias and such. And we've been kind of having the wrong philosophy on how we work the braking system. And we really hit a number in the race that made things incredibly different for me, which was another reason why I was able to stay with the top front runners, because most of the time I can't. The car would not be able to perform like that with such braking. We found something with the system, and we were able to basically make it work better, make it extract more performance, and we will no doubt will be carrying that into the next road courses. And I think that was really the key difference in the end of our weekend.
And I know coming into the season was kind of a perception that yourself, maybe Lockie, would kind of be there as a couple of the championship favourites, so to speak. You obviously find yourself a little bit quite far back, obviously, after the start you've had to the season. So you maybe just talk a bit about what you maybe expected coming into this season in terms of like goals, whether you were fighting for the championship, and maybe whether that's reset, if it's reset at all, kind of through this early part of the year.
Yeah. Like I said, even just how we're talking about whether I like a chaotic race or not, like my head's always up there, in P1 in the podium positions. I think, especially after what we just talked about with the braking system and just the tires and figuring out a little bit more. Obviously, we have to get to Road America Mid Ohio to really, solidify this momentum on the road courses. But I think my headspace is even more towards, we should be up front, because it's clear that we make a fix on the car, and clearly, like, I have no trouble anymore. It's clear that there needs to be a fix on the car, and the whole team has trouble, and it's just like this back and forth, whether we find it or not. Unfortunately, the program on the road and street has had some difficulty with that consistency, but I know with the right things underneath us, for me, Max, Colin, Jordan, then that's when we start performing, no doubt.
And I guess coming into year 3 in the championship as well, I guess people sometimes see that as kind of almost a last gasp opportunity to get to IndyCar or what have you. So I guess naturally that maybe brings some expectation. But I'm interested, just what is your relationship with pressure? Like, how do you respond to pressure as a driver?
Yeah, pressure is something that you can't avoid. I try to channel it into my preparation. And I try to leave it at that. The more I channel into my preparation, the easier I am during the race weekends, during the sessions. It's never really something that comes to me in the car. It never actually comes to me in the car. It's never really something that comes to me even before the car. I'm very comfortable when I'm in the seat and when I'm about to do what I do best at. And it's really something that you feel in between weekends. But I think I channel it well in my preparation, and that's how I really, absorb it, acknowledge it, but then also release it in a correct way. And I think that is kind of what helps me move forward and almost like invite it, because it almost helps me prepare more and be ready.
And just kind of speak to us a little bit about the environment that you have at Able Motorsports. You obviously joined the team at the start of last season. You had that really successful year, and maybe sticking with teams is that common in Indy NXT. So why did you want to stay with Able? What is it about the environment and their philosophy that you really like as part of that team?
Yeah, so they had great success with Paps Racing, and Able Motorsports is kind of that team in Indy NXT, and regardless of the future of IndyCar, let's stay present. Like, that is a team that I'm honored to be with and honored to go through the trials and tribulations and bring about success with. That's something that brings me a lot of pleasure, and it's a privilege to do. And I couldn't say any more than that. It's as simple as that.
And we head to Gateway this weekend, and Enzo said on Sunday that you'll come the benchmark for everybody else that they're chasing this weekend. So kind of just tell us a little bit about what you expect from this Gateway and how much are you looking forward to returning back to the ovals for the first time this season for you guys.
Yeah, Gateway will be fun. We definitely had great testing there, and great success in the past, in the 25 season and the ovals in general. No doubt we'll be looking to come out the box strong. But there's people are right on our tails on the ovals. This is IndyCar and the Indy NXT series, so we know we're gonna have to work very hard. We're looking for nothing than a P1. But obviously the goal is podium, because podiums brings points and points brings championship. So we are looking for that win, especially after coming off of second place, looking to go one step higher. But it's mainly about just adapting to what, we have to deal with, everything positive and negative in the weekend, and making sure, we extract everything accordingly, sequence everything accordingly, so that we can take away a podium and then more than likely a win.
And obviously your best results have come on ovals. So do you kind of have a sense that you are best suited to the ovals? Like, what is your kind of thoughts around whether that's your biggest strong suit? Because I know obviously with your best results coming there, people may kind of perceive that, but do you feel like it's a particular specialty over other things? Just kind of talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I don't actually. I really think my road and street course racing is my strongest. I think I'm very well rounded. I think all of them kind of like oval, street, road. I think what people see on the ovals is, and at least in the results, that's what I know I have on street and road as well. There's nothing different there. Regardless whether I finish in P11 in qualifying, that was just as strong as my P1 oval qualifying. Sometimes, the cars just allow you to create different results. And that's what we've seen in my 2025 campaign. Hopefully, we get those results in the ovals coming up, and then the 2026 campaign hopefully shows those same results on the road and street courses. But I believe it's the same exact technique and same exact finesse. And I never thought the ovals was stronger. It's just I've been blessed to have very strong cars on ovals in order to be able to deliver the results that I know I can bring there, that I hopefully will bring on the road and street as well.
And to kind of end off, on ovals, how valuable is having experience? Because we'll see a lot of guys participating in their first oval race this weekend. Maybe a lot of people struggle with kind of the cadence of races and when to use the highline, when to not use the highline, dealing with traffic. So is having that experience of oval races really important to just gain that familiarity, and eventually it helps your results, as maybe we saw for you last season?
Mm-hmm. I think it depends on who you are, honestly. For some, no doubt. But ovals oval racing is a very high instinctive, intuitive kind of application of a driver's skill. And there's a lot. And I think when I started, that's what I learned. I never in the Lucas Oil Raceway races, even in the first times driving, it was never something very abnormal. It almost felt way more natural than you would expect, because there's so much, everything's very constant. You're not slowing down and accelerating. So you're using a lot of the wind and a lot of the downforce. And that takes a lot of intuitive thinking and a lot of intuitive anticipation, which is very key in part of, the talent and what makes a driver progress through their career and just, beat other drivers and be the best. Right. And I think some, I think some like Enzo, maybe Timic and stuff, they'll find that, this is just enough at the track because their intuition, guides them. And oval is a high intuitive sport, high intuitive skill. And I think it really depends on the driver, to be honest.
Awesome, Myles. Congratulations once again. First podium of the year, well deserved. And as you say, let's hope this weekend at Gateway we can see you go one better.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
So thanks to both Enzo and Myles for their time. It's great to catch up with them both. Myles for the first time, really kind of a bit of a different insight to what we get from most of the drivers there about his weekend and a bit more about the philosophy. But Archie, let's go into our debrief of the weekend. It was just a single header this weekend. Obviously, our last two episodes at both Barber and Indianapolis, we've been focusing on double header weekends. We're back to just the one race this weekend.
Makes it easier for us to recap what happened, that's for sure. It can get a bit convoluted when there's multiple things going on at once. But for the fifth time in 6 races, it was actually Alessandro Di Tullio who claimed the P1 award. And it's actually the 6th time in succession that he has gained a point for leading his group in qualifying as well. So his stellar form on a Saturday continued. And actually, for the 5th time in succession, it was the same 2 names on the front row, as Di Tullio shared the front row with Max Taylor, who had actually crashed in practice 2, which he had led only a couple of hours before, had a replacement engine and a rebuilt car, but still managed to bounce back to top his group and finish 2nd in qualifying, which was pretty impressive. Kuharczyk had to settle for 3rd place ahead of J.M. Correa for Cusick Morgan Motorsports, which was a pretty standout qualifying effort in 4th. Lockie Hughes was 5th, showing some renewed pace after what has been a bit of a rocky start to the season, really. And Salvador Dialba, you could say the same for him. He started in 6th place. The top 10 was then rounded out by Seb Murray for Andretti, the Cape powered by ECR pair of Matteo Nannini and Nikita Johnson, who actually led the standings coming into the weekend. And it's also worth noting for what will follow in Dan's segment, reviewing the race, that Rowe started 11th and his Able Motorsports teammate Max Garcia started 13th. There was only one incident in qualifying after Carson Etta for Ganassi hit the wall in turn 4. He'd actually already been caught up in an incident with Garcia in first practice. Garcia crashed in turn 1 and Etta kind of had nowhere to go and ran into the back of him. But without further ado, Dan, talking of crashes and chaos, let's get into the race.
Yeah, you've heard this from Enzo and Myles both already, but turn 3 at Detroit, which is obviously the opening corner for the race, provided its usual Indy NXT chaos, as we saw the pole sitter taken out once again. Di Tullio, like it was in Arlington, being hit by somebody else at the start. This was quite egregious from Hughes. He completely missed his braking point and ploughed into the back of Di Tullio. To say it was clumsy might have been an understatement. Even before then, though, as you heard from Enzo Fittipaldi, Juan Manuel Correa collided with Salvador Dialba even before the start, which saw Dialba lose his front wing, kind of limping down into turn one. As that was all unfolding, lots of other people got involved in the unfortunate action. Taylor had to take avoiding action, which effectively sent him to the back of the field. We also saw Fittipaldi pick up his damage there. Correa actually moved into the lead. However, once IndyCar reassessed the positioning, he was demoted to second behind Kaharchik, who was kind of involved but managed to avoid it for the most part in the turn one chaos. The penalties were obviously then assessed from that point. Hughes was given a penalty for avoidable contact, unsurprisingly, for stop and hold of 30 seconds. Correa was also penalised, which was very confusing at the time because there was nothing really concrete in the replay to show as to why he got penalised. But it's since become clear that he was the one who instigated the incident with Diablo at the start, which meant Diablo lost his front wing. So he was given a drive-through penalty for his troubles there. Whilst that was going on, Taylor, who had started effectively at the back after having to take avoiding action, and another penalty for jumping a restart, as he handed himself a drive-through as all of that was going on. So once we got restarted and all the penalties had been served, Kaharchik was leading and he built a pretty comfortable gap ahead of Fittipaldi, Rowe. Sebastian Murray was in fourth, followed by Max Garcia. Those two switched positions pretty quickly, and Rowe was able to get Fittipaldi for second on lap 20. We had our second caution of the race come out on lap 26 for a bit of debris, which I believe was on the entry to turn 4. And then kind of the next real flashpoint of the race happened on lap 29, where, as you heard from Mars, he went for a Rowe and Kaharchik, which went a little bit wrong. Both of them were force wired. That gave Fittipaldi the chance to kind of sneak up the inside of them both to take the lead. Rowe slotted into second with Kaharchik in third. The caution was brought out again on lap 31 after Niels Coulon was in the barrier at turn 8. Kind of amongst whilst all this was happening, we saw some interesting moments. First of all, Matteo Nannini, he got a blocking penalty, which meant he had to yield 2 positions, and then he didn't serve that penalty and therefore had to take a drive-through, which dropped him significantly down the order after running just outside the top 5, which was a bit of a blow for him and a bit of a clumsy thing to do. The other strange thing we saw was Ricardo Escoto pulling the pits on lap 20, kind of without explanation. They interviewed Ricardo Juncos on the broadcast, who also couldn't quite explain why Escoto had retired. So haven't really heard since what happened there, but he was the other retirement in the race alongside Coulon and Taylor. Hughes and Tertulio were running at the end, but obviously there were so many laps down from the contact at the start that they weren't really part of that race at all. By this point, with so many cautions, the race had now become a timed race. It was planned to be 45 laps long, but they only had a 55-minute window to run it. So it became a timed race by the end of it. They only got 42 laps in, but that was kind of a little bit short when Max Taylor crashed at turn 1, very similar to the crash he had on Friday. He'd been making good progress through the field up until that point. He'd got comfortably inside the top 10 before he kind of went to the barriers at turn 1 when he locked up, and it was a pretty big blow for his championship hopes, considering the progress that he had made back through the field. So it was a bit of a shame there for Taylor. There was no chance to get the race restarted, only 4 minutes left at that point. So after that kind of heated moment midway through the race, Fittipaldi kept his position and was victorious for the second time in 2 weekends ahead of Rowe and Kaharchik. Max Garcia equaled his best result of the season in P4. Seb Murray earned his second top 5 of the season, coming home in 5th. Nikita Johnson, who had led the standings up until this point, he had a pretty quiet weekend, all things considered. He finished 6th in the end ahead of Stati, who got his best Indy NXT result in 7th. Bryce Aaron finished in 8th ahead of JM Correa, who finished in 9th, obviously rebounding from his penalty. And Colin Kaminsky finished in 10th for his first top 10 of the season.
So, as a result of all of that, Fittipaldi has jumped to the top of the standings at 7 points ahead of Johnson, who is a further 1 point ahead of Kaharchik. So it's only 8 points now splitting the top 3, which is a pretty good fight, really, after a couple of years with runaway champions in Indy NXT. At this stage, after 7 races, we still have 10 rounds to go. It's you would probably argue it's a four-horse race for the time being. Max Taylor is 38 points back now, owing to this scruffy weekend, but he's still pretty much in the game. You have to then go to 90 points behind the lead to reach Lockie Hughes, and Tertulio is a further 5 points back there. Myles Rowe is 107 points back in 7th. JM Correa in 8th at 110 points back. Then the top 10 is rounded out by Murray, 118 points back, and Missig at 126 points adrift.
So as you've heard from both Enzo and Miles, Indy NXT's first overall race of the season comes next time out as they join the IndyCar show at Worldwide Technology Raceway. We're going to come into a really busy period of the calendar at this point. We're going to head to Road America 2 weeks after for a doubleheader, and 2 weeks after that we have another doubleheader at Mid-Ohio. So these kind of next 5 races are going to be where the championship really swings in the next month or so, and we'll kind of see people maybe break away or fall off. It's going to be quite a significant few races, but I think the most important thing is going to be we're going to get a really good understanding of where the oval pecking order is. As we've kind of mentioned, Rowe maybe comes in as the favourite to the ovals, given his experience and the fact they had so much success last year. Hughes won this race at Gateway last year in pretty impressive fashion. He was taking the high line quite bravely towards the end of the race, which proved really successful. So maybe he could repeat his heroics like we saw last year, but we could well see somebody in their first oval race, like Fittipaldi, for example, take a surprise. Kaharchik is not his first oval race. Me and Archie were actually witnessing Timek Kaharchik's first oval race, which was at Lucas Oil Raceway a couple of weeks ago, where he finished third. He had a pretty good run. It was pretty entertaining, that one.
That was good fun just generally. Obviously, kind of we have our finger in so many different pies that it's quite hard for us to properly cover the USF championships, but I really thoroughly enjoyed that experience. It was for people who maybe haven't listened to our Indy 500 daily roundups when we did speak about this at some point. I think it was probably our preview of the actual race. We really enjoyed, I think, just the rawness and the kind of authenticity of basically just, I mean, first of all, a track where you can see it all, which is like, to us as Brits is pretty unusual because, you know, I mean, we're used to having, as Americans, we call them road courses, and you can see a couple of corners and that's it. So that was cool. But also just like the whole setting just felt so grassroots in a very endearing way. The paddock was in the car park. We had USF cars driving past our rental car, worrying about how we're going to explain away to the insurance company when we, if we were to get hit by an actual racing car. But really enjoyed that experience, kind of going to the roots of the IndyCar ladder, which was good fun at Lucas Oil Raceway, and 100% would recommend to anyone who does the 500 to go and check that out next year. Unfortunately, it wasn't actually on Carb Day, as it, you know, the Carb Night Classic, because of weather. It was moved to the day prior, but enjoyed that. Got to see Timek racing, which was good fun.
Yeah, I don't know how happy he was with his third place, but I think that was a pretty good first overall result. And it must be said, it was quite cool to catch up with some good friends of the show. Alessandro Tutulia was there, Max Taylor was there. I think Tutulia was doing some spotting. Taylor was doing some help for some other drivers in the USF teams. You also saw Jack Beaton there, who's very good fun. Hopefully we'll have him on the show at some point because he's very entertaining. He's told us that he's locking in for the rest of the season now, so we'll see how much of a success that is. They're pretty difficult Detroit, so let's hope his lock-in goes a little bit better for the remainder of the year.
So that is basically it for Indy NXT Debrief from Detroit, but we do have just one piece of news to quickly mention. There is a driver replacement for Gateway. Nicholas Stati, off the back of his best result in Indy Next, has some prior commitments, so he's being replaced by the returning Juven Sundermordi, which is pretty cool. I mean, he was showing really competitively in 24 when he last raced, and unfortunately just hasn't got a shot since then. So good to see him back, and that's one to watch out for the Cusick Morgan Motorsports team, lining up alongside JM Correa.
And of note, he was on the podium last time he raced at Gateway, so it'd be pretty impressive if he can do that once again for Cusick Morgan Motorsports. But that's it for Indy NXT Debrief this week. As you said, we'll be back post-Gateway, hopefully with some of the top-performing drivers once again and rounding up all the action there. So for this time, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.